Hello, everyone. Welcome, welcome. Today, we are going to tackle a very, very interesting chapter from our science syllabus, our environment. It's all about, the world that's right outside our door and how we fit into it. I promise you, by the time we're done with this, every single concept will be crystal clear. So, what are we covering today? First, what is our environment? Then, we'll dive into ecosystems, what they're made of. After that, we'll look at food chains and food webs. Then comes the super important 10% energy rule. We'll also tell you the story of our ozone layer. And finally, we'll talk about something we all deal with, garbage. Ready? Let's begin. All right, first things first, let's get a handle on what the world around us is. Now, you must have heard these two words a lot, environment and ecosystem. People use them all the time, sometimes even together. But are they actually the same thing? Let's figure it out. Okay, so look here. Your environment is basically everything that's around you. Simple, right? The environment in India is very different from the environment in, say, Russia. Super cold there. But an ecosystem, that's a bit more specific. It's where all the living things, we call them biotic, and all the non-living things, the abiotic ones, interact with each other. Think of it like this. The environment is the whole stage, but the ecosystem is the actual drama, the play that's happening on that stage. Make sense? Okay, so let's zoom in on that play, the ecosystem. This is where all the action happens. It's really the basic working unit of nature, and it's made up of a few key parts. So, ecosystems come in two main flavors. First, you've got the natural ones. Things that nature made all by itself, like a forest, a pond, or a big lake. Then you have the artificial ecosystems, the ones we humans have made. A great example is an aquarium in your house. And here's a super important point, please note this for your exams. A crop field, what we call a khet, is also an artificial ecosystem. Why? Because we humans are in charge of it, right? We add water, fertilizers, and all that stuff. Now, every single ecosystem, whether it's natural or man-made, has two kinds of building blocks. You have the abiotic components. That's just a fancy word for all the non-living stuff, like air, water, soil, and sunlight. And then you have the biotic components, all the living things. And these living things have three main jobs. They can be producers, consumers, or decomposers. So who are these guys? It's actually pretty simple. Producers, well, they produce their own food. Think of plants and algae using sunlight. Then you have consumers, that's us, and all the other animals. We can't make our own food, so we have to eat other things to get energy. And finally, the decomposers. These are the cleanup crew of nature, like bacteria and fungi. They break down all the dead stuff. And this all fits together in what we call the great circle of life. Look at how it works. The nutrients are there in the soil and air. The producers, the plants, they suck up these nutrients to grow. Then, the consumers, the animals, come and eat the plants. But eventually, everything dies, right? And that's when the decomposers get to work. They break it all down and return those very same nutrients right back into the soil. You know that famous saying, "Mitti se janme hai, mitti mein mil jayenge"? This is exactly what it means. We come from the earth and we go back to the earth. It's a perfect cycle. Okay, so we've established that living things eat other living things to get energy. But how does this energy actually move from one to the next? Well, there's a whole system to it. And that brings us to our next topic, food chains and food webs. So what's a food chain? It's exactly what it sounds like. It's a chain that shows who eats whom. Super simple. For example, grass is eaten by a deer, and the deer is then eaten by a tiger. See, it's a straight line showing how energy flows from one to the next. Now, each step in this food chain has a special name. We call it a trophic level. Think of it like ranks in your class or levels in a video game. At the very bottom, level 1, you always have the producers, the plants. At level 2, you have the primary consumers, the herbivores that eat the plants. At level 3, you've got the secondary consumers, and so on, all the way up to the top boss, the tertiary consumer. But hold on, is life really that simple? A straight line? Not really, right? Think about it. A deer might eat grass, but a rabbit also eats grass. And a tiger might eat the deer, but a snake might eat the rabbit. It gets complicated. And that's where the food web comes in. It's not a single chain. It's like a whole spider's web of many different food chains all connected together. It's much more realistic about what's actually happening out there. Okay, now listen up. This next point is, and I cannot stress this enough, very important for your exams. The flow of energy in an ecosystem is always, always unidirectional. That means it only goes in one direction. The energy from the sun goes to the grass. The energy from the grass goes to the deer. The energy from the deer goes to the tiger. Can the tiger give its energy back to the deer? No way. It's a one-way street. Please remember this. So energy is flowing from one level to the next. But here's a big question. If a deer eats a lot of grass, does it get all the energy from that grass? What do you think? Well, the answer is a big no. And this brings us to probably the most important rule in this entire chapter. And the rule is this: only about 10% of the energy is passed on from one level to the next. That's it. Just 10%. So you're probably wondering, wait a minute, where does the other 90% go? Does it just vanish? Well, no. The living thing uses that energy for itself. For all its life activities, for running around, for breathing, for digesting its food. A lot of that energy is just lost as body heat. So only the 10% that's stored in its body is actually available for the next animal that comes along to eat. This picture of an energy pyramid makes it super clear. Let's say the producers at the very bottom have 1,000 joules of energy, okay? The primary consumers who eat them only get 10% of that, so 100 joules. Then the secondary consumers who eat them only get 10% of that, so just 10 joules. See how quickly the energy drops? This is exactly why food chains are usually so short. There's just not enough energy left to support more levels. All right, let's switch gears a bit. We're going to talk about something that's like a giant invisible shield protecting our entire planet. I'm talking about the ozone layer. And to make this really easy for you to remember, I'm going to tell it to you like a little story. Okay, so here's our love story. High up in the sky, there's a happy oxygen molecule, O2, just two oxygen atoms together. Along comes a super powerful UV ray from the sun and bam, it splits them apart. Now you have two single lonely oxygen atoms. One of these lonely O atoms sees another O2 molecule floating by and it decides to join the party. So O plus O2, what do you get? You get O3. And that, my friends, is our hero, ozone. But what's a good story without a villain, right? And in this story, the villain is a chemical called a CFC, or a chlorofluorocarbon. These used to come from our old refrigerators and ACs. These CFCs travel all the way up to the atmosphere, and they're really nasty. They find our hero, ozone, O3, and they break it apart, turning it back into plain old oxygen, O2. It's like a betrayal. And when they do this over and over, they create a hole in our shield, which lets all those dangerous UV rays from the sun get down to Earth. Unfortunately, that's not the only way we affect our environment. There's another really serious problem called biological magnification. It sounds complicated, but the idea is simple. Imagine farmers spray pesticides on their crops to kill insects. These chemicals don't just disappear. They get into the soil, into the water, and then into the plants. A small fish eats some of these plants, then a bigger fish eats many small fish. At each step, those harmful chemicals build up and become more and more concentrated. And who's at the top of many food chains? We are. So the highest amount of these dangerous chemicals can end up right inside our body. Okay, this brings us to our last topic for today, and it's something that every single one of us creates every single day. I'm talking about garbage, or waste. What we do with our trash has a massive impact on our planet, so let's talk about it. Basically, all our waste can be sorted into two big categories. First, you have biodegradable waste. This is the good stuff. Well, relatively. It's things like your leftover vegetable peels, old paper, a cotton cloth. Nature's decomposers can break this down and turn it back into soil. But then you have the really problematic stuff, non-biodegradable waste. Things like plastic bottles, glass, metal cans. These things, they just don't break down. They'll sit in the environment for hundreds of years, causing all kinds of pollution. So let's wrap this up with a very simple real-life situation. Imagine you've just finished eating a banana and drinking some water. You have a banana peel in one hand and a plastic bottle in the other. You see two dustbins, a green one and a blue one. Where do you throw each item? The banana peel, of course, is biodegradable, so it goes in the green bin. The plastic bottle is non-biodegradable, so it goes in the blue one. It's a simple choice, isn't it? But making this right choice every single time is the first and most important step we can all take to protect